Hey everybody, August 21st, 2025, here with your after hours recap. So today was kind of an expected day. I would say, yesterday I kind of made the mention that, there are no real shorts in the NASDAQ right now. And so when I was kind of looking at that bounce yesterday, it felt more like we've been seeing is, the dip buyers doing the dip buying. And then NAIM came out today, and sure enough, there was a big jump in that number from last week to this. And, it kind of just reminded me that I don't really want to be long a bunch of NASDAQ names. Like, yes, there are some names out there that are acting really well, and we can go through a few of those in just a moment. But once again, you got some outperformance in the Russell versus the NASDAQ. And as I've kind of been thinking for the last week or so, that to me feels like it will still be a fruitful trade so long as positioning is super skewed. Short the NASDAQ, long the Russell. So even on up days for the market, the Russell's outperforming. And then even on down days for the market, the Russell's getting its ass kicked a little less. And that, I think, it just has to do with positioning. And we'll kind of see what that ends up looking like going into the weekend. But there are still some names, in my opinion, that are acting fantastic, that really feel like, they might have another gear in them. Obviously, SE has been holding up tremendously after the earnings gap up. I got to give TEM some credit. This thing is acting really well. DraftKings is another one that is just sticking out here after earnings, right? This is just nice tennis ball action where you kind of fall off for earnings and you bounce right back. That is very nice to see. And ultimately, there are still some names out there where it's just a little bit more tricky, whether it be crypto related, the MSTRs of the world, and they're not all like this, but, this one's starting to live under the 200. Do we reclaim back quickly? And this is just, kind of like, a failed breakdown could turn into a potential breakout down the road. My issue with that is, I've got a few problems with it. But one, Bitcoin potentially double topped here at 125,000. It's just been a slow, steady bleed off. I remember seeing a few messages, on X yesterday of, Bitcoin's outperforming the market. The market was coming down as it was washing out in the morning, and Bitcoin was showing a little bit of relative strength. And then as the market started to actually bounce, the NASDAQ, the Russell, the S&P 500, Bitcoin really just kind of put the pause on it right there, and then today a little bit lower. And I have issues with anything if they start to reside for too long under their 50-day. Even a great company like CrowdStrike, when you start to hang out under your 50-day for too long, right, that's kind of the start of a sell cycle. Now, under the 200 is a longer-term downtrend over 200 days. And CrowdStrike, for the most part, you broke your 50, you're now basically hugging that 200 simple moving average. This has kind of been the theme with cybersecurity recently with some software application names. They're just not in uptrends despite all the bullishness in the NASDAQ, which is just a little bit odd, but it just kind of goes to show you how strong some of these semiconductors have been, how strong AVGO was, and TSM, and CRDO, and ALAB, and NVIDIA, AMD. Just awesome power there, for the last few months. And, it's just kind of a tricky environment, at least for me, because I always like to remember that after the market, or really should I say, the best time to buy stocks is after the market has a correction. Well, we really haven't corrected any. You're still up quite a bit for the NASDAQ over the last 4.5 months, to the tune of 40% off the lows. So from just that perspective alone, my thinking is, even when I look at a chart like STX, while yes, it's bullish, I've been saying I'm not a buyer of something up here like this, right? You make a move like this, you need a whole new base, multi-month breakdowns, failed breakdowns, reclaims, sideways, higher lows, the whole deal, months, right? A couple of weeks just isn't going to do it when I look at charts like this. And it's the same deal for Microsoft. It's the same deal for NVIDIA. It's the same deal for GEV. It's the same deal for Palantir. It's the same deal for Roblox. It's the same deal for a ton of names. names that had been carrying our market higher. And that's kind of the issue when you're so top heavy, and then you've got positioning crowded on the long side, and now you've got NAIM, just at kind of not extreme levels, but up there, where you just start to say, hey, you know what? I got to pump the brakes here. There are some stocks that may be opportunities to get yourself and sneak yourself into, but there's just really no edge. It's just super choppy out here. You think, oh, V-shaped recovery yesterday, yay, we're back off to the races. And in the back of my mind, I go, that little bounce is not shorts covering. That's people buying the dip in an already crowded tape. I know tomorrow's Jackson Hole. And then again, even when you think about that, on the flip side, the not crowded tape, the shorted tape is the Russell, and it's seemingly outperforming the crowded tape over and over and over and over and over for the last 2 weeks, right? So until positioning gets neutral, I think that the Russell can continue to outperform the NASDAQ. Like, yes, will the NASDAQ have spurts where it can outperform the Russell? Absolutely. Tech can, carry the way, and Apple can bounce, and Microsoft can bounce, and Meta can bounce. But, the reality here is it's just choppy. Where are the clean setups prepared to go higher? Today I was looking at AEM. I obviously did not take gold, but this is a clean little bull flag into the 20 and continuation higher. So I don't know how much I personally love gold here, considering, this thing is just hugging its 50-day. Like, I'm over here thinking after 5 months of sideways, like, all right, gold, let's, are we going to go make that, that final hurrah push after a year and a half of just a super clean uptrend? I'm not sure. And then on the flip side of what's going on, you've got something like Palantir, just kind of getting beaten up and now hugging its 50-day. Holding on to the 50-day is very, very important here. The last thing we really want to see is having it gone down, digest, and then potentially lose it. I am short Roblox, and it's the same deal, right? It's like you get this move down into the 50, and now you're hugging the 50-day, and then even in after hours, you're slightly losing it. So, what could happen to Roblox? I don't know. $100 lower, who knows? And in the back of my mind, we probably have a little bit lower to go, and it's got something to do with positioning. It's got something to do with the NAIM. I'm not looking at AAII sentiment surveys, right? My thinking is always this: don't tell me how you feel, show me how you feel with your dollars. And everybody with their dollars right now is packed into the long side. So while that's perfectly fine, it's a choppy environment on that side of the market. Why? Because it's crowded. Everybody is on that side of the boat. So it's kind of a pain in the ass. I am trying to find my way into some stuff, but recently I've gotten stopped out of a few names, right? Tesla, Hood, Oklo, and my TNA. And the reason I closed TNA is I didn't have a hedge to that TNA position. So I am still looking to get long TNA. I'm hopeful for a push in the NASDAQ, so then I can short it and kind of, run that playbook until positioning is completely neutral. But right now, that's just a crowded trade. I will give some credit to, a lot of the stocks that had hammer bars. Not all. In AppLovin, there was a little bit of follow through today. In a BE, held up incredibly well. Not tons of follow through, but continues to hold up well. You make a big move like this, sideways is awesome. Sideways is what we're getting. And it's just holding in there, allowing the 50 to catch up, building a new high type flag. Could it be ready to go in a few weeks, or really even next week? I think so. And that would be something that I could see myself being interested in. But ultimately, it's just a choppy environment. I don't see a ton. There are a few names, again, something like AAOI just, churning and churning and churning just underneath the 200 simple moving average, right? What happens when it reclaims and can actually hold? It feels like one of those that maybe can make a bigger move at some point. It's kind of proven that before, and here we are just building out a whole new base just underneath the 200. But it's a choppy environment, guys. I don't know from any of your trading if you guys are just absolutely crushing it on the long side. If you are, congratulations, but I don't really see anything that's just been in a clean uptrend unless, you're a cigarette company MO. So that's kind of how it is right now. It's just a pain in the ass. So I don't really know what to make of the market here, other than I still like TNA. I still like what biotechs are doing, XBI, but I don't really want to own an individual biotech name. I would rather own something like LabU because it's a bit of a faster mover. And I would rather own something like TNA. So, maybe tomorrow, if we take out effectively yesterday and today's highs, could be pretty interesting. We'll see kind of how that shapes up for tomorrow. And maybe I don't take it, just going into the weekend clear head. I still have my arc long. And this was slightly red today. Nothing wrong with it. Needs to hold the 50. Effectively, it needs to hold yesterday's lows for me to keep it. I still have CCL, and this thing has just done nothing for an entire month. Kind of annoying to be in, but just going to continue to hold it. I have a short in QUBT, and for some godforsaken reason, this is the strongest of the bunch. I don't know if somebody knows I'm short this damn thing and just wants to squeeze my ass out, but certainly what it feels like. Kind of jokingly, it's annoying, but here we are. And then Roblox, which was very weak today. And I'd like to get some ads in potentially on a break of the 50 simple. If the market's also kind of rolling with it, would make it a whole lot easier. But even the market today just kind of hung in there, and Roblox acting fairly weak. So nice to be short. I'm in from 129 bucks. So, ideally we can get a washout, sub 100 would be super sweet. But really no opinions for me either way. I'm having not really a difficult time getting long because I haven't tried any longs in the last 2 days. I tried QUBT a few days ago, and I'm sitting, kind of up a buck on it. Nothing super impressive. But I don't really know what to make of the market here, other than I don't really want to be long a bunch of tech because it's just choppy, right? And then the names that can drag the market higher, they're already made big moves, right? You think about an NVIDIA, you think about a Microsoft, you think about a Meta, you think about Google, you think about Amazon. These names aren't really doing anything. And even an Amazon, you were hugging yesterday's lows. Think about an Apple, you broke yesterday's lows. And some people would have looked at that as, hey, the market's bouncing. And to that I'll also say is I've kind of always viewed Bitcoin as the place where extra liquidity goes. When Bitcoin kind of starts to fail, my eyes and my ears perk up a little bit, where I go, that's kind of weird as it relates to sentiment in the market, because Bitcoin's done really well for the last 2.5 years. And I think the minute that Bitcoin kind of starts to act poorly, it might mess with traders' sentiment. I don't know that that's going to necessarily be true, but we'll kind of see how that ends up playing out going forward. Ultimately, there are some stocks that continue to act well, and that is great. But there are some stocks out there, again, even something like an Oracle, where you're just hugging the 50, right? You don't want to start living below the 50, guys. I'm not going to sit here and call CrowdStrike a crappy company, but when you start to hang out below the 50 and then reject the 50, you can start to sell off in pretty dramatic fashion. And I'm not calling the tops on CrowdStrike. I'm just kind of showing you what visually can happen when you start living below the 50. That is not what we want to see. That's not what we want to see for Bitcoin. Obviously, that's not what the bulls want to see for an MSTR now living below the 200. That's not what people want to see for a name like Coin. That's definitely not what people want to see for a name like Palantir. So, that's just kind of my 2 cents here. Also, MP, I thought had a fairly nice day, trying to get back through its 20 on a small pickup in volume here. There was some news as it relates to, maybe some money being reallocated from the semis to the rare earths. That's fine. But even an MP just needs a new base. You make this huge move up where you make 100+% move really from June. You make a 300% move. Guys, you need a new base. Everybody lives in this fantasy land. When you look at an STX or a Roblox or a Palantir, there's a reason I was trying to short Palantir near the 180s. It just gets a little ridiculous, and stocks historically, they don't just keep going. They stop, they pause, they breathe. That's natural. It's normal. They consolidate. They digest the move. the train slows down, allows people an opportunity to accumulate, and allows you an opportunity to hop back on a not moving high-speed train. So it's totally normal. It's healthy. It's what we want. So I'm kind of with Roy Maddox on his tweet that he put out. I think the market can absolutely go a little bit lower. If the market's going to start acting better and it looks like it wants to go higher, I will also incrementally try to get myself repositioned on the long side. But, really with no recent success, I'm not here just trying to hammer away on longs when it's choppy. I would personally rather play the short side. Same way that in April, I was coming off of a bunch of shorts in February and March, and in April, I had some students asking me like, Ariel, where's the short setups? Where's the short setups? You're making a ton of money on the short side. And I said, I don't want to short here when the market's down 20%. I'm not bearish just because we're in a bear market and the market has now gone down 20%. That's the laziest analysis ever. The time to have gotten short was in February and March, right? And then in April, you started to get stopped out of stuff because things started to show some relative strength. And that's when you track relative strength, is when the market goes down. Well, when the market makes a 40% move up, what's showing relative weakness? Those are your potential shorts for when the market shows some distribution. So it's just the opposite, right? I don't want to think about, we need bases. And where the hell are the bases? When I ask where are the setups, what I'm really asking is where are the bases, right? There are some stocks acting well. TEM, I mentioned a few of the gold names in AEM. I think those look fine. I think Unity looks pretty decent. I think DraftKings looks pretty decent. I think Rush Street looks pretty decent. These kind of gambling stocks, that's fine. But they're just too far and few that are working, and that's the issue. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind, and then. Yeah, like I said, we'll just take it one day at a time, and we'll try to get repositioned. And I'll we'll see what tomorrow brings, and I'll figure out what's going on for Jackson Hole tomorrow. And we'll try to get repositioned on the long side incrementally if the market's acting well. If not, I'm comfortable adding to a short on Roblox as it's breaking the 50. So kind of just being comfortable here with both sides of the market. If you don't like shorting, that's totally fine. You don't have to be in stocks that are breaking down. That's not a problem. If you're long bias only, I personally keep no bias. Stocks are either going up or they're going down. I could give a crap in what direction they're going. I just need to make sure that I manage risk properly and show up on the day, focus on names that are showing relative weakness, show up on a day to short when the market has distribution, focus on the names that have been showing relative strength, show up to buy when the market's being accumulated and going higher. Very simple. That allows the stock to move away from my average no matter where I buy it or short it, and then it allows me to comfortably hold it overnight so that I can trim off a piece a few days later or cover a piece a few days later. So hopefully that makes sense, and I will see you guys all tomorrow bright and early for pre-market prep. Cheers.